Okay. In alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam ala wa rasulullah. I want to welcome everybody back to the Let's Talk About issues that's affecting us as an ummah today. And we have Brother Youssef, the champ. He's back. And today he's going to not only speak a little bit more about Andrew Tate, but he's also going to speak about what's happening in the European part of the world, the UK in particular, because we have to remember as Muslims, whatever happens there happens here. In fact, this is going on here in America too. It's just not on a higher plane. That's all. But so I want everybody to sit down and sit back, and yes, you can share us. Yes, please share this stream to all your social platforms. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Brother Youssef, and inshallah, you can start whenever you're ready.
Now, we've been hearing this now off and on in the media for the last 6-7 months, but it's been going on quite longer than that. And I want to give a take on it that I guarantee you've never heard before, because we are going to get to the bottom of every single aspect of this issue. We are going to understand the motivations. We are going to be sympathetic even to the British, as well, because we're going to be seeing exactly what's being done to them, along with what's being done to us, and how we are being pitted against each other for the sake of another, and two guesses on who that other is. We will uncover that as we go on, obviously. So a little bit of a follow-up before we start. Andrew Tate this past week, I talked about last week in the lecture about how he had been ripping his followers off with his crypto coins. Well, literally the next day after I had talked about the previous times he had done this, he had done it again. And apparently a lot of backlash, a lot of people canceling their subscriptions to his website, a lot of hate being directed toward this individual, because people were starting to see when I used those quotes last week about what his main head honcho, so to speak, had to say, that his chief goal in life was to liberate money from the idiots and funnel it into these supermen, so to speak. And I think the idiots saw Saturday they were kind of tired of playing that role and being there to benefit the pockets of Andrew Tate and his entourage. So hopefully we're going to see a little bit more of the tide turning. Immediately we saw this week Andrew Tate going out and bragging again about his charity. We can just read the Quran and find out what Allah feels about those who, did you see what I gave? You see what I gave those type of people? Because that's exactly what Andrew Tate spent this week doing. Because he knows, again, that the burner's on him. And, oh, wait, did I tell you I donated here? Did I tell you I donated here? Trying to get it back, in good graces, particularly with the Islamic community, so to speak. So we saw that happening this week. Also in the news, we saw Donald Trump begin his administration, and he already pledged $500 billion with a B dollars to a gentleman who goes by the name of Ellison. Anyone who's familiar with the tribe, so to speak, knows what L in the name means, which ethnic group that is. And the project is going to be the development of, guess what, more mRNA vaccinations, now incorporating AI. And how it's going to work is you're going to go to your doctor, your scam artist, your drug dealer, your pusher, and he's going to do blood testing. And of course, he's going to find some possible traces of cancer in your blood. 20 years down the line, you might develop this, and they're going to give you your own customized death vaccine, basically, an mRNA for you. They're going to charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for this. And unfortunately, as always, the people are going to line up for something they've been told they might get. The parallels between this and the COVID scam are just eerie. I guess they didn't sterilize enough people or cause enough problems with their original mRNA. They're coming back for round 2. But that's how Donald Trump, began his week. So lots of things happening. And we're going to come back to that in a few weeks, because I was appalled at the COVID response of the Muslim community. It disgusted me. I fought with an imam about the mask policies and the things and tried to tell them the truth about what was going on, and I was basically ignored, told I was crazy. Later on, we've seen all that stuff was a bunch of rubbish. But we'll come to that, later. Just wanted to touch on some things that are going on. So now we're going back, turn the clock back a bit, to what they've affectionately called the Islamic grooming gangs. We've also heard the term Pakistani grooming gangs. A lot of these individuals are Pakistani origin. So we're going to break this down, section by section. We're going to look at all the different angles, here. We're going to touch on immigration in the UK, what's going on there. We're going to touch on issues of Islamic principle as it relates to these gangs. And we're really going to go through the numbers and the data. We're going to analyze this in an unbiased way. And by the end of this, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of what's going on here, all the different areas and layers of it. And it's all going to make sense to you. So I started hearing about this in the early 2000s. The mainstream media largely ignored it at the time. I wasn't Muslim at the time. I was just used to immigrant crime, as we're going to talk about later, what the governments in the West have been doing, bringing in unfiltered, unvetted men, military age for decades now. And I was not surprised that immediately you were going to start having incidents like this. But then it started to turn a little bit as I was becoming into Islam. They started pushing it on a Muslim issue. This is not an immigration issue. This is not a low-life issue. This is not an issue of the fact that we're bringing in the worst people from around the world who have no job skills, giving them welfare, giving them apartments, had nothing to, it's Islam now. Islam is commanding. And I had started studying Islam at this point, so I was, where's all these passages that I keep hearing about? So I started getting very inquisitive in this issue pretty early on. So we know from between 1997 and 2013, in an area called Rotherham, we had 1,400 British girls were involved in this scandal, typically ages from 11 to 14. This is the total of rapes that we saw. A lot of these girls were very poor families, single parent homes, the usual destructive environments along with a Western culture. That's a recipe for disaster, as we're going to look at a little bit later. But these young girls were basically a lot of times foster homes, foster care, didn't have a strong guardian, very destructive family environments. And they were open, for this type of thing. They were seeking, as we're going to look at later, they were actively seeking relationships with these older men, because they're coming from a culture where the British media is bashing their own men, calling white men the scum of the earth. This happens all day in the West. They praise the immigrants constantly, to the point that a lot of these guys become larger than life to these impressionable young girls, and they were approaching them. It wasn't in all cases these men grabbing them or kidnapping them or what. These girls willingly went into the cars in a lot of cases of these men. Now, we have different figures on the numbers of this across the whole UK, because at the time it was just confined to this Rotherham area. We had a gentleman who goes by the name of Lord Pearson. He would state in 2018 that it was 250,000. But when that number was scrutinized, what they found was he was taking the equivalent population of Rotherham and applying it to the UK as a whole, which is obviously unfair. There's different demographics, different social circumstances, and all these type of things. So this 250,000 number is just completely outrageous. Elon Musk would later come out, and Elon Musk said it's 1 million. And it's Elon Musk, so obviously it got massive headlines. Elon Musk could never really admit where he got that number from. In fact, I broke this down just to see how much ridiculous this number would be. And if that was the case, if you look at between 2001 and 2018, 8 to 9 million people in the UK were British girls of white origin, Caucasian origin, from 11 to 15. If Elon Musk's data is correct, this would mean that 1 in 9 British girls during that period of time in that age demographic were raped. Obviously, that's not the case. Elon Musk is doing this to just basically blow, on the fire, trying to make this situation, unfortunate situation, seem a lot worse, than it is. We've seen immeasurable damage done to Pakistani brothers and sisters who are doctors, who are healthcare workers, who had nothing to do with this. In fact, it's about 2% of Pakistanis had been involved in this, which if you look across all the demographic groups, it's basically even lower. So the majority of Pakistani men are not taking part in this. This has been something, again, that was the fanning the flames, so to speak. In fact, I saw a video that was done just a couple of weeks ago. There was a Western woman who went to Pakistan, and she was dressed and kind of slightly conservative dress, but still not fully, you could say, Islamic dress. And she was treated in great respect in Pakistan. The people treated her great. Now, when these same women, as an example, go to India, it is completely different. And most people who've read or have seen will attest to that fact, that the Islamic culture of Pakistan is much more friendlier and hospitable to the women than the Hindu culture is in India. So I just want to say that for the Pakistanis who've been unfairly stereotyped, racial stereotypes harm us all. No matter what group you've been racially stereotyped at one point in time or another. Some, may, if you're African American, oh, you're all criminals. If you're white, you're a rich racist. You got white privilege. You're trying to oppress everybody. If you're this group, you're a rapist. If you're that group, I used to say if you're Saudi Arabian, you're from Saudi, you're lazy. Well, that one's actually true. If we got any Saudis watching, I love you. It's just a tongue-in-cheek comment there. But back to as we were saying, it's really unfortunate for anyone to be looked upon, in such a way as these people were. Now, the Muslim community, what did they do during all this period of time of 20 years? Well, the Muslim community pretty much was silent, on this, which again fanned the flames. They should have just simply came out and publicly said, we condemn this behavior. And it's irresponsible from this media to constantly put every single Muslim on trial for something that's not even our religion, because a member of our religion, at least in name only, happened to commit it. No other community on this earth has to deal with this. If there's a rapper and he's wearing a Christian cross and he's grabbing his privates and he's cursing every other word and saying violent this, drug dealing that, no one ever says, look at what the Christians are doing. But only in the case of Islam, we're going to look at why later, do they do this. That we are expected to apologize on behalf of every single one. But unfortunately, that's the rules of the game right now. And it's best for our image that we do so, that we do condemn, these men, that we don't give these enemies who already despise us anyway, even more ammunition to attack us with. No nation should have to accept basically the scum of another, period. I mean, all people of all walks of life, I think we lost. Can you hear me, Sister Layla? Oh, okay, because my camera feed went down. I thought that you guys had lost me. Oh, okay, yeah, I got you. Perfect.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So yes, back to that point, that we again as Muslims should not have to go out and apologize, but we also should show the public solidarity against these crimes, which is something unfortunately that was not done, by the UK Muslim community. We've seen numerous cases where this has gone on, which I will talk about, later as well. But just wanted to get that opening out as we were seeing the exaggerations. And recently, out of nowhere, this issue got brought up again by Andrew Tate, by basically Elon Musk, by the Zionist toy, Tommy Robinson. He's a wind-up toy. The Zionists just basically twist it and they let him go, and he says the same regurgitated talking points over and over again. But the key thing that gets ignored a lot is that we have to understand the British perspective here too. These men have no business being in the United Kingdom. I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about immigration in the United States and about how the immigration system used to be the best and the brightest. Now, as we're going to see, it has completely changed. We are bringing in the worst elements of every single nation on this earth. If you take anybody, England, bottom 5%, Europe, all countries, bottom 5%, China, bottom 5%, United States, bottom 5%, Pakistan, bottom 5%, and you throw those people into a nation, you're going to have problems. That just goes without saying. So let's understand a little bit about why the men were there. We're going to move on to all the different layers of this. I will start this off by simply quoting a famous saying, revenge is a dish best served cold. And that's one of my favorite quotes of all time, because it really in many ways sums up the individuals and the people that we are referring to. It meaning that when you want to plan revenge on a specific people, it must be time consuming. It must take time. It's more sweeter the more effort you put into it. So you're going to ask me, well, what do I mean by that? Well, obviously, when we're dealing with the Zionist element that controls our countries, our financial institutions, our immigration systems, they obviously have an agenda, as we are going to see. If you go back to 1290, we're going way, way back here. We had what we called the Edict of Expulsion. This is when King Edward I expelled all of the Jews from England. This is back in 1290. 360 years later, they would be opened up again by a gentleman who goes by the name of Cromwell. But this was a period of 360 years that Jews had been expelled from the United Kingdom. They went to places throughout Central Europe and ultimately Eastern Europe as well. You find if you go and just do a simple Google search, you will see that almost every single major European nation, either currently existing or past extinct, have expelled these people at one point in time or another. If you look into the reasons as to why, what you will find is the usual thing: usury. And that was the exact reason cited during this Edict of Expulsion in 1290. So you have basically a massive exodus of Jews from these European countries. Obviously, they didn't take that very well. As we saw with our Palestinian series, I showed you how long they took to orchestrate their ultimate revenge in that part of the world on the Ottomans and others who stood in their way. There are numerous recorded statements that we can find from rabbis stating they want to eradicate all Europeans. They want to, in fact, turn Europe into a graveyard. You can find enough of these quotes to fill days worth of reading. I've been subjected to them during my researches for over 25 years now. They are clearly making statements here. They want revenge on the people they felt that had done them wrong. So we're told by the media with this Rotherham gang that the reason basically they didn't report ethnicities or any of these things is because they feared basically an ethnic backlash. That the reason that the police covered it up and there weren't punishments and there weren't arrests and all these things was because they didn't want to flame racial tensions, as if these people have ever cared about doing that. They certainly have no problem angering the immigrants, as an example, with their treatment of the Palestinian situation. They certainly have no issue with their blind support in Israel of angering the immigrant community. Large part of them are Muslim. They had no issue there. They certainly have no issue angering the white British when they have to turn on their historical shows on BBC and see all characters who are known British being replaced by people of African and Indian and other racial descents. They're replacing the British in their own history. And they certainly have no problem offending them when it comes to that. But they want us to believe that the police and all these departments are complicit in covering it up because they care about the feelings. If you look at who controls these police departments, you go to the top, almost always you're going to find a master mason, a high-ranking mason. They're all in on it. It's all the same show. So again, immigration is an ultimate weapon. We've seen unlimited amounts of military-age men being described as refugees fleeing war. These men are unvetted. No one even knows where they come from, half of them. They throw their passports in the sea. In a lot of cases, they hop on a boat and they head to England. Why? Because England has the most generous welfare benefits of any of the major countries in the West. So for starters, if these are really truly refugees, what kind of refugee are you if you're a man who is fleeing a war zone and you're leaving your women and children behind? You are not a man. You cease your man card at that moment and you become a coward. I could never imagine a million years something bad happening in my country and me telling my wife and kids, hey, bye-bye, I'm going to go get welfare in England. I'll bring you later. So for starters, that's just, beyond. And in fact, Allah has condemned this cowardly behavior in the Quran on numerous times of turning your back to an enemy. These men are leaving the women and children in a supposed war zone. Now, we know most of them are not fleeing war. That's not the case at all. There were some initially coming from Syria, and the media carefully used that to paint every single one of these guys as being a Muslim. I saw one time there was a boat. It was nothing but people of Indian and Asian descent. And people were saying, look at the Muslims coming in. They want their Sharia law. I saw one time they had a boat and it said, the headline said Syrian refugees. And every person in that group was of African origin. I've been to Syria. I mean, I never saw people in Syria who looked like this. Obviously, it was again to start the Islam boogeyman. They're coming to bring Sharia. They want to get you, all that type of thing. So these people are not coming fleeing war. They're coming for British benefits and all the other things that go along with that. I saw one interview one time. There was an asylum seeker. He was from Egypt. And I'm thinking, from Egypt? Where's the war in Egypt? You know, how is this guy allowed to come into somebody else's country when there's no justifiable excuse? He doesn't have a job. No one knows what his educational background is. So again, obviously, you're going to have some problems. You know, like anytime you offer or open up the borders to 99% military-aged men with no achievements, don't speak the language, there's going to be a problem. Who are these men going to have women with? Who are they going to marry if they want to do it the halal way? What's going to happen here? You're disrupting the fabric of society. All societies are built with a balance between male and female. You're bringing in the worst men of every one of these societies and throwing them under the same umbrella and expecting there not to be chaos. This situation reached the ugly turn this past summer on July 29th. And this is where we see the extent of the anti-Islam propaganda. You had a gentleman by the name of Axel Rudukubana. He entered into a dance studio wearing a green hoodie and a mask, and he proceeded to stab young girls who were practicing dance. One girl he stabbed 122 times. The other he stabbed 80. He was not Muslim. His name is not Muslim. He doesn't look Muslim. His background did not say he was from Islam, but yet the media and Andrew Tate. In fact, Andrew Tate and his brother had posted pictures of this guy on their social media saying that's the guy that did it, when it wasn't even the same guy. I hope the guy who they falsely labeled sues them into oblivion for character assassination, because this guy could have gotten stabbed or killed. He's just a normal guy, had a job, had a degree, was contributing to British society, and just because he was of African origin, he's being tweeted by Andrew Tate saying, look, here's the murderer right here, because I didn't kill nobody. And unfortunately, that went on. You had just nonstop the Zionist wind-up toy Tommy Robinson saying again, this is jihad coming to our shores, you know, when he could never cite any such passage that said this is a permissible act in Islam, much less constitutes anything related to a jihad. This guy's not even Muslim, and still to this day, I saw today them lying and saying that this gentleman is a Muslim. He was another of these refugees. Parents were born here, brought him there, and he was born in the UK. Look there, Sister Layla put him up. And it's like anyone that is non-European white, basically, they are labeling as a Muslim. And we're going to see why coming up here, you know, in a little bit. So if I'm British, obviously, the average British person doesn't know much about Islam. I don't think we've done a good enough job of introducing ourselves and educating people about who we really are. As Sister Layla was talking about back in the 1960s, where her and her brother were wearing the thob and the hijab, and the guy had made a joke to the brother, you know, insulting him that he was wearing a dress. I mean, Westerners have always had issues understanding what Islam is, because Islam has always been taught to them by people who are not Muslim. You know, this is always who's been doing the education on Islam. It's been by the enemy. It's the Christian apologists. It's the Zionist-controlled media has always been educating them on who we are. So if I'm British, I'm sitting at my morning getting ready for work, and I turn on the TV, and I see this Muslim man, they didn't even use the guy's name, Muslim, stabs girl, 8 years old, 122 times. I'm going to be very, very angry, you know, at my government, but also I'd be very angry at Islam. I'm going to say, what kind of religion brings these type of people here? And again, if you've been taught for 15 years straight that there's a religion that seeks to kill you, displace you on your own land, we have to understand their perspective. And we have to extend the olive branch to them and let them know we're here basically to make the world a better place. We are not here to kill. We are not here. In fact, all the problems that we're going to talk about later as we close today, that British society is being inflicted with, Islam is the cure. But that's not the message, obviously, that they are getting. They are getting a message that we're here for jihad, and that jihad involves raping a 5-year-old and stabbing a girl 122 times. Back to those particular men that Sister Layla put up earlier. Again, all they would have to do is read the Quran. Those men committed zina. Most of those men were married. Any Muslim can tell you what the penalty is for zina to a married person in our religion. Those men are scum, and may they burn in hell. We have no claim, toward them. So what happened was the British people went out into the streets and they attacked. I saw a Dawa booth got attacked. They destroyed the Qurans. They were looking for Muslims or people of foreign origin to attack. The innocent Muslim community did what they should. They banded together and they started taking care of their masjids. They started taking care of their women, their families, and so on. But then what happened was we had the same type of thing, but on the other side. We had a story of British men ripping hijabs off women, and one of them, they said they tried to set her on fire. This was a complete lie, again, by the Zionist media. So see the game. Over here, they give you the reason to hate person A. Person A now is realizing person B hates them. They're going to defend themselves. Oh, wait, look what they did to you also. They're trying to set your women on fire. It's classic divide and conquer, and the irresponsible media has no filter whatsoever. They did this intentionally, trying to get the British to hate the Muslims to hate the British, and then you see bang. All around a guy who had no business being in the country in the first place, who was not even Muslim, all based on a lie. The British government is a terrorist organization. They are openly terrorizing their citizens. They're bringing in the men that they know are bad news. They're enabling them. They're giving them money. They're giving them homes. The police are covering for them. The media is covering for them. And they're doing all this to their own people. The British people and the Muslim community both are victims of this terrorist state going on in there. And again, to my original point, when I talked about the expulsions, who controls? How are these men getting in? Look at the NGOs, the non-government organizations. They go down, they pick them up, they take them to a port, they bring them in, they provide them with mobile phones. There's videos all around of these men landing. The second they land, they get mobile phones, they get money, they get basically temporary debit cards with money on. This is an operation that is being funded. It is a military operation to destabilize the European and American, obviously, society. So in my second section here, we're going to be focusing on Islam and why exactly is Islam being blamed here. So first and foremost, Islam has, as I mentioned, clear punishments for zina for both married and unmarried. Nothing these men did, even in the most corrupt or weak of hadith narrations, could anyone find any justification. Labeling these as Islamic crimes, about enslaving kuffar women and all these other things, again, I challenge them to find any such evidence in the Quran and the Sunnah. Yes, Islam allowed at the time for what they called, the Christian apologists love this, those who your right hands possess, or the bondswomen. These were women who were part of a war, unfortunately, and they were held captive. But also, if you look at how Allah requires the men to treat these women, the dignity that the slave and the bondsperson under Islamic law were entitled to. And then you compare that to what you see in the Old Testament, where they were ordered to basically kill every single woman and child in the town, with the exception of the virgins. Well, how do they know they were virgins or not? I mean, I'm going to leave that up to the imagination to decide. But no one ever comes out and condemns Christianity, which embraces the Old Testament. No one ever comes out against Judaism for such just extremities when it comes to war. But yet having captive women from a war where most of the men were killed or eradicated from that society, and providing them basically hospitable wife treatment, being cared for, clothed, and fed. There's nothing in Islam that says go inside the town and grab the women and capture them as slaves, but that's the narrative, again, that's being taught. Islam, again, the only religion on earth where we are expected to claim the crimes of someone who's just simply a member. Christians don't have to do this. Jews certainly don't have to do this. When the Catholic Church had their homosexual priest scandal, no one walked up to the Catholics and said, "Oh, all of you guys are homosexual." You never saw this. They said those are a few bad priests, but with us, no, it's the whole religion led them, to do that. So again, we're going to get now to where we're going to start showing again some aspects here of Islamic society. So if there's any non-Muslim viewers, I'm sorry, I want to ask them a question. Why is it, if Islam is so inherently dangerous, and Muslim countries would obviously be dangerous as well, if you have a religion that teaches you slaving the women, raping young children, all the other things they ascribe to us, why are countries like the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Jordan, they're such high on the British tourist destination list? You go to any of those countries, they're filled with Westerners. Bahrain and Dubai, Bahrain, half the country is foreign, non-Muslim at this point. You see this everywhere. I lived in the Arabian Gulf for over 10 years. I can personally attest to the safety, and I did see some corruption there, but in terms of safety and crime, you can't beat it. You could lay on a street park bench in the middle of Saudi Arabia with a stack of money on your chest. I don't believe you'd honestly be robbed. In America, you could walk around 5 minutes, 5 seconds in certain parts. Not only would you be robbed, you'd be shot, as well. I talked even to Westerners during my time period over there. And one of the reasons they said they never wanted to leave was because of the safety. So if all these racial groups of people, the Pakistani, the Arab, the Muslim in general, are so violent and so prone to rape, why then in a country where they comprise 80 to 90% of the demographics, are we not seeing this same type of behavior? You just simply don't. And as I mentioned, Westerners cited the safety, opposed to London, where you've got knife crime everywhere, gang warfare, one of the most unsafe, disgusting cities like New York City on the face of the earth at this point. Why? If Islam is, again, that bad, we would certainly see something. But again, there's two main reasons for this, and they don't want to have that conversation. Reason number one, those countries actually bring people in for one reason. They work. The people that go to Saudi, Bahrain, UAE, any of these countries, they have a degree, they have a job skill, they have something that they're bringing to the country. They add. They're not just bringing a man because he's a man, obviously. They're not bringing people in who you don't know their educational background or their criminal history. These countries do a very good job of screening and vetting the people that come in. So whether you go in there, there's no welfare, there's no free handouts to non-Saudi, non-Bahraini, non-Emirati citizens. When you go there, you're going there to contribute to their society and follow the law. So you don't have any of this problem. You also don't have the ability to have a say in the government. No foreigner can come into Saudi or any of these GCC countries and start telling the people how horrible they are and they need to change for them and all the other things that we're seeing from some of these, immigrant groups. The Saudis then put everything pretty firm, on that. If you fly a foreign flag inside any of these countries, you're deported immediately. In America, they come here, they openly fly the foreign flags. You go to California, you think you're in Mexico. They fly the Mexican flag more than they'll ever fly the American flag. So again, the type of immigrant that the Gulf is bringing in is much different than the type of immigrant of these 99% men that I was talking about earlier. The second big point they don't want to talk about is something we call law and order. There's actually not full Sharia in these countries, but there is an application of it. You do see some of the Islamic strictness is still left. Not enough, but some of it is still there. None of these people would dare commit what they committed in the UK in any of those countries. They would get the death penalty. They would be executed. You'd be executed for pedophilia in Saudi Arabia. You'd be executed for rape. You'd be executed for drug trafficking. All the things that a lot of these so-called refugees are doing across the West, you would be executed for in these countries. When I went to the Dubai metro, I was amazed at how clean it was. No one spit on the ground. There wasn't any bubble gum. There wasn't any baby diapers or beer bottles or any of the things that you would see if you went to one of our public buses or transportation system like New York City. Because if you do, they've got a camera right there, and you're going to pay 4,500 dirhams or over $1,000 fine. And you're not going to be away because you're not going to be able to exit the country. It's going to, some cases, was even snatched directly from your bank account. So there's no escaping the fine. And yet you find beautiful, clean, everywhere you go inside of these countries. Truly amazing what law and order, decency, recruiting the white people, and this just blows their entire Islamic argument up. Because Islam, we're told again, is inherently violent. It's inherently rapist. Well, you should be having it 10 times the amount in Muslim countries, but yet we don't. You can even look at the sexually transmitted disease rate in Africa. African countries that are Muslim countries pretty much have zero rate of sexually transmitted disease. You look at Christian African countries, it's through the roof. It is just through the roof. I mean, I can get the statistics at a later date, but it's mind-boggling, the difference that Islam makes on the life. So Islam is not the problem. Pakistanis are not the problem. But again, why then such focus? Why so much resources into blaming Islam? Well, Islam is their ultimate nightmare. It truly is. And I'm going to show this in several stages here. Firstly, you have pornography, you have gambling, you have zina, you have riba, you have alcohol, you have drugs, you have LGBT, and you have pedophilia. Every single one of these is haram, in Islam. Every single one of them. So imagine if you made zina, adultery, illegal in the society. How many businesses are based in this country or in Europe on adultery? Bars, nightclubs, pornography, even the strip clubs, obviously. So much of the industries are based on people committing zina together. It is big business. These places like nightclubs would cease to exist. They would go out of business. There's no point, in going to them. Strip clubs would cease to exist if we had decency laws. When you look at riba, the financial institutions, all are based on riba. Whether you want to buy a car or a home, how many billions and billions of dollars they make annually in collecting riba and keeping us as debt slaves, all would cease to exist. Their drive to promote the LGBTQ to further break down the family and lower the birth rates for their population reduction dream. Islam kills that, because it's very firm and strict. Alcohol and drugs, billion-dollar businesses, billions. Every bar, all the sports game alcohol sales, everything would cease to exist if we had an Islamic society. All their economy that it's based on currently would come crashing down. Islam is a threat. They cannot allow Islam to thrive unless it's, of course, the kosher, nice guy, compassionate Imam Islam that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks with what I call Muslim 2.0. They don't want this. They want the chaos from the immigrants. They bring, as I said, the worst of the worst. But the good people that come to become doctors and nurses and contribute to the society, the women who wear the hijab, notice they're banning that. They're banning the niqab. They're banning the hijab. They're calling the hijab ugly and divisive. All the good things they want to attack from Islam. But they do want the people, to come in. They just don't want the Islamic culture. So again, about to bringing in the military age men, that's what they want. Showing the seat of division. They want these type of things. And the Muslim community, obviously, again, has been complicit. There was a story from Spain where two of these, phony refugees, these were from Morocco, supposedly. They attacked and killed a Spanish man. They robbed him, murdered him. And the imam there shielded them, from those men turning them in to the authorities. Later on, the men left the masjid. They were arrested later. So it wasn't like the imam was sheltering these men to protect them from vigilante justice. No, he was keeping these men, trying to get them off, trying to get them away. And luckily, the police later on caught them. And again, we see this time and time again. Sister Layla's told the stories to me in private about what's going on here in America in certain masjids where you see the same type of things, where our own community is covering up for the criminals based on their nationality. That's my people. That's my nationality. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. You see this going on across the board. And it's just a big, big problem for us that really hurts, our image. So as we go on to another phase of this problem that is incited by these grooming gangs, and that is the current decadence of the Western woman. So before we go on here, I just want to kind of preface this by stating that the Western women I'm referring to is not a particular racial group. These women can be white, they can be African American, African, they can be Hispanic from South America, they can be Asian. When I say Western women, what I mean is that any woman who identifies, who binds herself to feminism, to openness, to promiscuity, and embraces the decadence of this culture, this is who we're referring to. And the role of the Western woman within this tragic situation here, because a lot of time, like I mentioned in my opening, you get hear about the bad men. And yeah, the men are bad, no question about it. But at the same time, I mentioned also that these women willingly went. They talked about in one of the reports on this that they weren't targeting white girls because they were white. They were targeting them because they were easy targets. These men had no objection to raping their own women as well. It was just that the Asian women of their own community were raised in Muslim households and they were less promiscuous. They were harder to get. So these guys basically were going after easy targets. We are going to cover later on. Here's an example of some of the British, people involved here in some of these crimes. You could see again that this sexual rape, it has no color. It's across the board, but yet we're only hearing, of course, about the Muslim, connection. We will do something talking about the destruction of the Western woman in a few weeks, but we're going to talk about a lot of that here now too. So most of these young, innocent girls that they've been described had active sexual relationships with these men. These women, as I mentioned, were seeking this. Reports show the men didn't mind raping and using their own women, as I also talked about. So this, again, was not a racial. These white British girls went willingly to initiate this process, while the Muslim Asian girls from traditional backgrounds were shying away, were not actively, getting to this. I come from this white Western culture. I grew up in it. I was immersed in it. I know it inside and out. I know all the responses that they're going to say. I know all how these conversations are going to go. And this is an extremely difficult conversation for white Western men to have. It just is. They don't want to talk about it. They want to pretend it doesn't exist. They will call me all sorts of names and they'll say, oh, well, you're painting all women like that. All women aren't like that. There are some good ones. And yes, there are. But the vast, vast majority are bad apples. These women are becoming monsters. They are out of control. They're not the little princesses and the daddy's little girls that a lot of these men want to harken back to. These women are out here actively engaging. Just as an example, we saw a British woman recently. She had intimate relations with 100 men, 100 men in 12 hours. 100 men in 12 hours. And then that's not even the best part. She was immediately topped by a woman who said, I'll do better than you, came and did 1,000 in 24 hours. The 1,000 girl said that the first one had stole her idea and she wanted to show her how it's done. Now, in Islam, we have a saying about competing with each other for the best of deeds, competing each other in charity, in kindness, in prayer, in fasting. This is how these women are competing indeed. They are competing with who can fornicate with the most men in a period of time. Now, it got so bad that the feminists even are coming out for the first time in my life I can recall. Maybe it's happened, I didn't see it. But the first time I can recall, the feminists are saying for these women to slow down. Just slow down. You're taking it too far. You're teaching all the men around the world that Western women have no value and they're nothing more than promiscuous prostitutes. So even the feminists who were the springboard of this type of behavior, when they said, who are you to police a woman's body? Who are you to tell a woman what's right and wrong? Telling the men to step back and let the women be women. Now they're even saying it's gone too far. You can see these videos, and they're all over the place, of these women professing to having 3 to 4 partners a week. You just do the math, on how many that will be per year. And again, the guys will say, oh, you're painting them wrong. You're giving a wrong image of these women. I worked with these women. I saw the same girls who were considered to be good girls having 3 to 4 to 5 partners per month. In some cases, some may have 6 or 7 per year. This, by Islamic standards, is unacceptable. And these hypocrites in the West who dare to attack the Prophet ﷺ for marrying 9 women, they always go, oh, what is sex monger, blah, 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 blah. You just hear it never ends. But yet they never address these were his wives. He looked after them. He took care of them. Never do you hear them say a peep about the woman with 1,000 men in 24 hours. Never do you hear them say a peep about the average girl talking to 3 to 4 men at the same time and using each man for a different favor, all active sexually with those men. You never see them paint. They always say, oh, well, it's consenting adults. Well, wasn't the Prophet ﷺ's marriages consensual? As well? Weren't these consensual adults? Weren't these loving households? I mean, it's just the hypocrisy knows no bounds. It's just insanity. The way they attack us for the same thing they're doing in a much, much worse, way, even than how they're presenting, this. These modern women, they're not suitable life partners. They don't do anything in the home. They don't add anything to the marriage. They're broken. I mean, if you've been with that many human beings, you've had that many partners, is it even capable anymore for you to know love? It pretty much is not. And psychological studies have shown that. They are damaged. There's no way they're ever going to be able to be a loving wife anymore at this point. It's just, it's so far gone. And until the West is willing to have this conversation with itself about the condition of these women, problems like we talked about tonight are going to continue to happen, because there's always going to be bad men of every racial group in every society. There's always going to be those bad men. And there's always going to be women making bad decisions with such bad men. You even look now at the films that are being promoted in Hollywood. How many of them now have a female lead actress beating up men? I've had women tell me, I don't need a man to be with me. I can take care of any man myself. These women are growing up watching these fantasy stories showing one woman beating up 3 to 4 men, and they believe that this is reality. They believe they can go out there and defend themselves in every situation. These girls go into an apartment with 8 men sitting there, and they're a victim at that point. They're getting kidnapped. They're getting assaulted. They're going to get degraded. They believe they were in control. They were the boss lady, so to speak. And it's going to continue to happen until the West has this conversation with itself. And after listening to what I've had to say tonight, I really don't want to be divisive, in any way, just calling reality what it is. That Islam is caught between an old ancient feud between the Zionists, the people of Europe. The Zionists want to destroy Europe. They want to use Islam to do it, but they don't want Islam to be left in the ashes. They want Islam to fall. Islam is their worst nightmare. A Muslim society is the worst thing they could possibly ever, imagine. They would lose all their businesses. They would lose all their tools and means of control. So they have to keep the boogeyman narrative going. They have to get us mutually to destroy themselves, to replace all this with Muslim 2.0 initially, a soft version of Islam, which is tolerant and open to deviancy. And ultimately, they replaced it with absolutely nothing but secular consumerism, which is the end goal. But in order to get to secular consumerism, you've got to go from Islam, Muslim 2.0, then you're going to go to secular consumerism. It's all within stages. But I hope I conveyed the message pretty clear tonight, what is really going on. over there, and how we can go about educating people that we meet on what the true Islam is. When people start saying these things, we point out to this Mr. Axel, he's not a Muslim. No one's ever proven he's a Muslim. His attacks are not consistent with Islamic teachings in the Quran and the Sunnah. Zina is punishable by death for the married person, punishable by lashes for the unmarried. Most of these men were married. Rape on any circumstance is forced zina, it's intercourse, illegal intercourse, and is to be punished severely. Non-Muslim countries filled with violence, rape, gangs, and drugs. Muslim societies, clean for the most part, healthy, safe. People are flocking to them. British people love to go to Dubai. Why? If we're so violent, why are our countries so peaceful? I'll close on that. And Sister Layla, we're ready for questions and discussion.